Greetings, fellow blockheads. Welcome to It's a Podcast, Charlie Brown, the show where we take a look at anything and everything in and around the Peanuts comic strip universe. My name is Bill. I'm your host. This is episode 136. Welcome back. All right. I hope things are going well with all of you. Things are great with me because I just enjoyed a lovely donut. I think Snoopy would approve, and it was tasty. It was a day or two past its best buy date, but you know what? I live in the 21st century, so I stuck that sucker in the microwave, some nice 20th century technology, zapped it for a few seconds, and it was all good to go. Quite tasty. I'm just going to take a moment here and think about my donut. Okay, moving on. So I hope all of you have something equivalent that you can enjoy, because I don't know if you've noticed, but things are a little tense out there in the world right now, and if you can enjoy something like a donut once in a while, you know, it's a sometimes food, not an everyday food certainly, but once in a while, a little pastry. Maybe not a donut, maybe you're more of a Danish type person. I'm not so much, but a donut's good, a muffin's always great. Love a muffin. What else? A scone? Scones are awesome. Let's just talk about pastries for this episode. What do you think? Maybe you're not a pastry person. Maybe you like maybe a little fruit, right? Maybe a little cantaloupe for your snack. I don't know. Whatever you enjoy, though, make sure you take time to do that, because we all need self-care. And right now, my littler dog is rolling around on her back in the sun. She's doing a little self-care of her own. So I'm just feeling good. What were we talking about? Oh, yeah. This is a Peanuts podcast. So what do you say we do some peanutty things right now? Like, I don't know, we could do this.
Whether it's Beethoven's birthday or Joe Schlabotnick's retirement anniversary, you will learn about it now on This Month in Peanuts history.
It's March out there right now, as this episode is going out. This month, in the month of March, we've got a few things on our list to note. As always, if you guys have suggestions for things that should go on the list, notable events in and around the Peanuts universe that we should remember each month, please send those suggestions to me. But here's what I have at the moment for March. We start with March 3rd. March 3rd, 1952, saw the debut of Lucy Van Pelt in the Peanuts comic strip. It's a little surprising, given what an iconic character she obviously is. It's a little surprising she wasn't there before that. Interestingly, like a number of the Peanuts characters, she makes her debut as a baby, right? Barely more than an infant. Schroeder, I'm vamping here for myself as I pull up the comic. Schroeder, I recall, basically wasn't even walking. Linus, too, I think. They were basically just able to sit up when they debuted. Lucy, as I'm pulling it up here, we first meet Lucy in a daily strip, 4-panel strip. Charlie Brown is sitting there with the comic book, and from off-screen, I always say off-screen, but from outside the panel we hear 1, 1, 1. Charlie Brown, who, of course, in this era himself was basically a preschooler, as were all the other kids, which primarily in 1952, before Lucy debuted, consisted of Charlie Brown, Shermie, and Patty. Not Permanent Patty, and Snoopy, of course. I don't even know that Violet was there yet. I should know, because I compile the news list every year, but at the moment I can't remember. So Charlie Brown's hearing this, and then in the next panel we see for the first time Lucy. She's jumping rope. She's clearly not a toddler. She's maybe as drawn, maybe 3 or so, or 4 maybe. We come to understand she is clearly younger than Charlie Brown at this point, but Schulz ages her up later, and she's essentially a peer. But at the moment, she's maybe 3 or so. But of course, like all the other Peanuts characters, she's going to have the language skills of an adult. So she's jumping rope. Kids, go ask your parents what that is. 1, 1, 1, and then back on Charlie Brown. Calls to her, 2, Lucy, 2. And then the last panel, we're back on Lucy, and she's going 2, 2, 2. Because, of course, she doesn't know what number comes after 1. That's how little she is. It's a pretty good strip. I actually like that one. Good debut. And as I noted, she's not an infant like Linus, or Sally was another one, or Schroeder. So, good debut. Clearly, in the early days, we're seeing already that Lucy's going to be this young, impressionable preschooler, basically. She's not yet the angry fuss budget that she'll become later. Nice. Big deal in Peanuts. I can't imagine. I was wondering, I assume Schulz introduced new characters, frankly, when he needed new ideas for things to do. Had run out of ideas for his existing cast, and I'm sure Lucy was the same thing. He wanted a new character to play with, but I can't imagine that he thought she would have the arc that she ends up having. Charlie Brown himself started out as sort of the smart one, I guess, in the group, sort of a wise guy, center of the group, and not the loser, I guess, that he becomes later. So all of these characters have arcs, except maybe Schroeder. Schroeder's pretty much fully formed, I think. He starts playing the piano. Charlie Brown actually shows him the piano when he's still a toddler, and that's pretty much his thing. That and catching baseballs. Pretty much his thing for the whole run of the strip. But Lucy, here she is as this impressionable little girl jumping rope. Very nice. If you have thoughts about Lucy and you want to share them, please do. The next date we're going to note is March 4, 1966. Woodstock first appears that day. Although he doesn't yet have a name, Snoopy is lying on his doghouse. There's a nest on his stomach. We're jumping into the middle of a storyline here. Birds have been slowly, as I recall, in the days leading up to this, building a nest on his stomach, and he didn't want to disturb him, so he didn't move. So now in this strip, he's saying, how do things like this happen to me? I'm too easygoing, that's why. I should have said something as soon as that stupid bird started to build this nest. The next thing you know, there'll be, and then the last panel, 2 little birds pop up in the nest. Cheap? One of them is saying, and Snoopy's like, I knew it. So there's actually 2 birds. They don't really look a whole lot like the Woodstock we'll come to know. Presumably one of them is Woodstock. I think there's some debate about whether this is actually the debut of Woodstock, and I may in fact have somewhere else on the Peanuts history list a different date. I don't recall at the moment, but I think this is generally understood to be the debut, and he doesn't get a name. Whenever he did actually debut, he doesn't get a name until the early 70s. So, very cool. Woodstock, of course I'm on record, is my favorite character because Woodstock is awesome. If you want to fight me on that, you're welcome to try, but you're going to lose because Woodstock is awesome. March 6, 1961, Frida debuts. I noted on here that she doesn't have a last name. Actually, what I said was no last name, ? Because one time when I was compiling the news list, it occurred to me, hey, I don't know what Frida's last name is. The Peanuts Wiki says that the character was inspired by a friend of Schulz named Frida Rich, was the 11th permanent character to join the Peanuts group, and appeared a lot early on, but then kind of phased out. Ceased to be a feature character after 1985, making only cameo appearances since then. Best remembered as the character with naturally curly hair. Well, that and the cat thing, Farron the cat. But yeah, don't know what her last name is. I guess it's a mystery that will survived through the ages. Moving on, March 7th, 1968. You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown makes its world debut off-Broadway in New York's East Village at Theater 80, starring Gary Berghoff playing the lead as Charlie Brown. Of course, not sure I even need to say this, but we all know Gary Berghoff better from the show MASH. Well, first the movie, MASH, and then the TV show that was inspired by the movie and debuted in the early 70s, ran to the early 80s. It's an iconic bit of television, maybe one of the first dramedies, right? It was set up as a half-hour situation comedy, but of course very early on established that it could also do really effective drama mixed in with the comedy as well. Man, MASH was a good show. Is it streaming anywhere? It must be. I didn't even get the DVDs and stuff. I can't believe I don't have the DVD set for MASH. I've kind of stopped doing it lately, but I used to buy DVD sets of TV shows, not all the time, but with some regularity, thinking, oh man, I want to rewatch this because I love this show. And then over time, I've come to realize, well, yes, that's true, but I don't actually rewatch them because there's so much new stuff that I want to see. And only so many hours in the day. So I've kind of convinced myself not to buy these. But man, MASH is such a good show. But if it's streaming, I got all these streaming channels. I should see if it's out there somewhere. Anyway, so it starred Gary Berghoff off-Broadway. It would run for 1,597 performances. And some of the shows sounded like this.
I don't think you have anything to worry about, Charlie Brown. After all, science has shown that a person's character isn't really established until he's at least 5 years old.
But I am 5. I'm more than 5.
Oh, well, that's the way it goes.
March 13th, 1963, Snoopy interacted with musical notes floating in the air as Schroeder played his piano for the first time. For lack of a better word, Peanuts was fairly grounded in reality, so to speak. But once in a while, Schulz would get kind of surreal. And one of his preferred bits of surreality? One of his favorite types of being surreal was how whenever music was playing, musical notes would float in the air. Part of that, I suppose, is because it's on the page, and that's a way of signifying for the reader, oh, okay, music is playing. Although I think if you see Schroeder hands on the keys of the piano, you can guess music's playing. But anyway, but it wasn't just that musical notes would float in the air. People would be able to, like I said, interact with them. There were a number of times Snoopy would grab notes out of the air. I think there was a strip, at least one, where Snoopy's sitting on a musical note. Stuff like that. So for the first time, that kind of thing happens on March 13th, 1963. In the strip, it's pretty basic. Snoopy's sitting on the piano as Schroeder is playing. He's just kind of watching his fingers move across the keys. And then the second panel, the notes are starting to come out of the piano. And it's getting kind of intense. And Snoopy's like, whoa. And then in the third panel, Schroeder's really going at it. And there's a whole musical stanza on the screen. And Snoopy's trying to look over it. But he's not quite tall enough. And then in the last panel, he kind of lifts himself up and puts his big head over the stanza to keep watching Schroeder play. So yeah, a little bit surreal, a little bit outside the sort of grounded norm of Peanuts, but that's the kind of thing Schulz could do from day to day. He's like, here, watch this, and we would just go with it. March 26, 1973, Rerun Van Pelt makes his debut, although he had been mentioned for the first time on March 23rd, 1972. May 23rd, 1972. In the March 26 strip, we see a little kid who can walk, because he's sitting down initially, but then in the rest of the strip, he's walking with Lucy. A little kid with spiky hair. To me, when I was a little kid reading this, I was confused, because I thought, well, that's Linus, isn't it? But he's acting weird. Of course, later I figured out, no, it's actually Rerun. Maybe because Lucy actually calls him Rerun in the strip. I maybe wasn't the smartest kid. So in the strip, Lucy says to this little kid, come on, Rerun, I'm going to take you for a little walk. It's about time you got to look at the outside world. Well, what do you think? Now they're standing outside, kind of looking around. And in the last panel, Rerun's like, you mean this is it? And I got to tell you, Rerun, I kind of see your point. In the earlier strip, the May 23rd, 1972 strip, Linus, Charlie Brown, and Joe Cool, actually, are all hanging out by the doghouse. We're jumping into the middle of a storyline here as well. Charlie Brown's like, what I don't understand is why your mother would allow Lucy to throw you out of the house. Linus says, Mom isn't home. She went to the hospital yesterday. Charlie Brown asks, is she all right? Linus, thumb and blanket, is like, I don't know. Nobody ever tells me anything. And in the last panel, we cut to Lucy on the phone, and she's got this alarmed look on her face, and she's shouting, because the letters are really big, a new baby brother? But I just got rid of the old one. And then the next day, they kind of continue that. Linus is getting the news that they have a little brother, the last panel of which has Lucy saying, I throw one out and another one comes in. You can't shovel water with a pitchfork. And that continues on for a little while. Basically, Linus thinking it's hilarious that Lucy has to deal with another little brother. Yeah, actually, there's several days of the Peanuts gang dealing with this news. March 27th, 2020, Harriet Glickman passed away. She, of course, was the person who wrote to Charles Schulz in the 1960s after Martin Luther King was assassinated to suggest to him that one thing that could be done to help further the cause of civil rights was for Schulz to include a black character in the strip. I believe Schulz acknowledged that, yes, it was something he thought about. He initially wasn't sure that he was the right guy to do it, that he would not be able to depict a black character appropriately, but ultimately he came around to the idea that, yes, this is something he could and should do. And of course, we all benefited from that because we got Franklin. Franklin's a great character. There's an argument that Schulz maybe didn't use him as effectively as he could have. He really kind of was a background character in the strip, frankly, but he has kind of come into his own. You can argue whether or not the animations are real Peanuts, quote unquote, but one of the things that the TV stuff, particularly the new stuff, has done is really made Franklin a central character. Developed a personality. He's usually kind of the science kid. Marcy has general knowledge about everything. Franklin seems to be the one who, if you have a science question, you go to Franklin. He even got Apple TV. Again, you can criticize Apple TV for what it's doing with Peanuts, but they have done a number of really pretty good Peanuts specials, one of which focused entirely on Franklin. So that's all been good for the character, who wouldn't have existed had it not been for Harriet Glickman, and we remember her on March 27th, the date of her passing in 2020. Also on March 27th, but in 1959, Lucy's psychiatric booth debuted. On that date, we see Lucy sitting at a table. There's no sign above her head that says the doctor is in or anything. It just, on the front of this table, it says psychiatric help, 5 cents, and then there's an empty chair. In the second panel, Charlie Brown is sitting in that chair, looking concerned about something, I guess. Lucy's sitting, chin in hand, concentrating or being skeptical. It's kind of hard to tell. And Charlie Brown's saying, I have deep feelings of depression. What can I do about this? Now Lucy's deep in thought. And then in the last panel, she's like, snap out of it. 5 cents, please. So the 5 cents, please bit is clearly there from the start. I don't know offhand when the booth starts declaring the doctor's in. The idea of using the word depression in a comic strip surely was unusual in 1959, but, that's all part of the way Schulz kind of revolutionized the daily comic strip. I think Lucy's response, snap out of it, was very much in keeping with how mental health issues were treated in 1959, so that part's not surprising at all. I think it's a very good strip. I think it's, the beginning of what would become an iconic part of Lucy's personality and the comic strip. And we note it on this date, March 27th, 1959. And that is the end of my Peanuts history list for March. As I said, if you guys have suggestions for other things that should be on the news list for March or any other month, send those ideas to me and I just might include them. A person I once knew, while complaining about someone she was arguing with, threw up her hands and said, he must think I live in a carnival-like atmosphere of glee. Upset as this person was, though, I always thought this sounded like kind of a cool state to live in. Well, I'm not there yet, but I've got a website, carnivalofgleecreations.com, and there's stuff on there, everything you can want, like the podcast Atari Bytes, featuring old games and original short stories that are pretty unrelated. And my other podcast, it's a podcast, Charlie Brown, covering anything and everything in and around the iconic Peanuts comic strip. If the printed word is more your thing, there are books on there too, like The Novel in the St. Nick of Time and short story collections Misery Banana, Hell's Cereal, and Second Duck on the Right. Want to know what else I'm up to? That's all there too. carnivalofgleecreations.com. Everything you need. Glee not included. Back in 2014, Peanuts Worldwide got together with French television and made a loaf of banana bread. And the French said, banana bread? And the Americans said, it's yummy. Oh wait, that was me actually. I made a loaf of banana bread earlier. I don't know what the French and the Peanuts Worldwide folks ate. I'm guessing they had a snack of some sort, because it takes a while to come up with a delicious idea like Peanuts by Schulz, a series of 7-minute-ish episodes directed by Alexis Lavallee. There are 104 of them in total. We have at this point in the podcast watched most of them. I don't have the list here in front of me. I think we're maybe at around 10 left. That's how far we've gotten in this podcast. So we're winding down Peanuts by Schulz, but we still got a few. Essentially, the episodes are, for those of you, the uninitiated, like I say, they are 7-minute episodes. They are mashups, basically, of different storylines from the strip. Each one loosely has a theme, and then there will be maybe 4 or 5 little segments that just basically animate the strips with interesting little storytelling aspects to them. Pretty much the dialogue from certain strips, but they might show weird little visual gags on screen. The show originally aired in France on a channel called France 3 and Italy on Ray Gulp. On November 9th, 2014, in the U.S., it aired on Cartoon Network and Boomerang on May 9th, 2016, starting then. Afterwards, DVDs of the U.S. version began to be fabricated. Those were put out between 2017 and 2019, beginning with a collection called Snoopy Tales, and the last one was Happy Holidays. In Germany, a series of 10 or more DVDs were produced due to how a series of 10 or so DVDs were also produced in Germany. Little secret here, you can also find them all on YouTube. Because I'm a lazy human, I usually just go to YouTube. The fun thing about that is when you watch a YouTube version of these episodes, you get the audio in English, if that's your thing. But whenever there's something written on screen, like the title of the episode or, well, title of the show, Peanuts by Schulz, that's English. But the title of the episode, like in this case, the one we're watching this time is Come On, Snoopy. That's in, usually, the YouTube ones I watch, it's usually in German. And then like during this particular episode, there's a segment at the psychiatric booth, and the doctor is in part all in German, even though they're speaking English. It's kind of fun. So the episode opens actually a little bit different than they usually do. I couldn't figure out if part of that is maybe just where the YouTube upload that I was watching cut off the very first part of the bouncy Peanuts by Schulz theme, where we see the kids all bouncing around on the title of the show, Peanuts by Schulz, Jungle Gym-like, but I don't think so. I think it was just a different opening. They cut all of that, and they hop right to essentially on-screen version of the throwaway panel in a Sunday strip, right? The very first panel, again, with the title of the episode, or in the paper, the title of the comic, Peanuts. And then the next panel, usually when we watch these episodes, is what I call a sepia tone, sort of a tinted panel. In this case, that panel is not tinted in the episode we're not talking about today, and it doesn't feature a voiceover of a character, usually Charlie Brown, saying something clever with sort of the theme of the episode. This time we hear Charlie Brown's voice, that actor, but he just says the name of the episode, Come On, Snoopy. Nothing like, sometimes, dogs are frustrating. You just want to say, come on, Snoopy. None of that. It's just, come on, Snoopy. Also, I'm not sure what the right inflection on that is supposed to be. I think what he did for his line reading, if I can, give director notes for the line reading 10, 11 years later, I think what he did was just say, come on, Snoopy. But I'm wondering if maybe the reading should be, come on, Snoopy, or come on, Snoopy, or come on, Snoopy. I don't know. You go watch it, see what you guys think. Okay, so the episode opens with Sally, actually, not with Snoopy. She's up at the front of the class with her little piece of paper. She's getting ready to give a report. She says, this is my report on our animal friends. Now, some of you city kids are not acquainted with animals, so I have brought a real live animal with me today. And Snoopy dances into the scene. Someone in the audience in the classroom says, what is it, a chicken? Snoopy is taken aback by this. Sally, though, she's a pro. She just rolls with it. No, this is called a dog. You're kidding. Looks like a moose to me. The kids are all now having a dialogue with each other about this. I agree. Here, Moosey, Moosey, Moosey. The class thinks this is very funny. We get an exterior shot of the building, and the sky above is filled with ha, ha, ha. So the classic way Peanuts shows that everybody is dying with laughter. Sally tries to regain control of things because, of course, there are no adults in Peanuts, so there's no teacher there to take control. Quiet, she says. I will take questions after the report. What do you feed it? They're not listening to her. What do you feed it? Fish? I still think it's a moose. Nah, it's too small to be a moose. It's got the nose. Sally tries to, push forward. Animals? How do we know it's a dog? Maybe it's a kid in a dog suit. Snoopy's had enough of this. He stomps off. But then his pride, I guess, makes him come back. So he stomps back in, but he looks very angry. Sally's are like, animals are usually friendly unless needlessly provoked. Well, it could have been a kid in a dog suit. Snoopy holds up a fist. See, he was provoked. That's the joke. We get our first interlude. As you guys know, the different segments of Peanuts by Schulz are interrupted with brief little interludes of Snoopy and Woodstock doing something cute. And those are always tinted, and they are here. This one is sort of a dusty pink. Snoopy and Woodstock are dozing atop the doghouse. Snoopy wakes up just long enough to steal a Z, the little snoring Z, from over Woodstock's head and put it over his own. Now we see Lucy at the psychiatric booth. Snoopy approaches. She tells him to sit down. He does, and immediately falls asleep. Lucy doesn't notice immediately, so she starts in with her, psychiatric analysis. Charlie Brown tells me you're having a problem. You recently developed a fear of the dark or something. See, this is where my problems with this particular episode start to come in, because we're jumping right into the middle of the storyline. I get that Peanuts by Schulz, these are like 7-minute episodes. They can't do a whole half-hour story like a typical Peanuts special would, but they have been able to do essentially, full stories, beginning, middle, end, and still follow the format of the Peanuts by Schulz with the different segments broken up. Here, they're not doing any of that. This one is just random bits, random parts of different stories. So just be prepared for that. This one we're jumping right in. Snoopy is afraid of the dark. And she tells him this. Charlie Brown tells me you're having a problem with the dark. No response. Lucy's like, I feel like I'm interviewing a teddy bear. Wikipedia, if you believe them, says that the teddy bear was originally developed simultaneously by toy makers Morris Mitchum in the United States and Richard Steiff under his Aunt Margaret Steiff's company in Germany in the early 20th century. It was named after U.S. President Teddy Roosevelt and was a popular children's toy celebrated in story, song, and film. They chose that name, Teddy, after President Theodore Roosevelt, after a hunting incident in Mississippi, November 1902. Roosevelt was invited by Mississippi Governor Andrew Longino on a hunting trip. There were a bunch of hunters along on this trip. Most had already killed an animal. A suite of Roosevelt's attendants, led by Holt Collier, cornered, clubbed, and tied an American black bear to a willow tree after a long day chasing bears, and called Roosevelt over and said, go ahead and shoot it. Roosevelt refused to shoot the bear because it wasn't sportsmanlike. There was a political cartoon generated out of this, where while the initial cartoon of an adult black bear lassoed by a handler and a disgusted Roosevelt had symbolic overtones, later issues of that and other Berryman cartoons made the bear smaller and cuter. I didn't say it. Clifford Berryman was the cartoonist. Morris Mitchum saw the Berryman drawing of Roosevelt and was inspired to create a teddy bear. He created a tiny, soft bear cub and put it in his candy shop window in Brooklyn with a sign, Teddy's Bear, and the toy became very popular. So he went on and founded a toy company. Wikipedia says the Steiff firm produced a stuffed bear from Richard Steiff's designs. He exhibited the toy at the Leipzig Toy Fair in 1903, and Herman Bird, a buyer for George Borgfeldt and Company in New York, ordered a whole bunch of them. The bears were produced by Steiff, but there's no record of them showing up in the United States. There's a rumor that the bears were shipwrecked somewhere, but that's disputed. It's more likely that the 55 PB, which I guess was the type of bear, were not sufficiently durable to survive until present day. Okay, I don't follow that. All right, so apparently they were made and shipped and whatever. They just aren't around anymore, I guess. Apparently neither of these guys knew that the other one was working on a bear. Wikipedia doesn't say whether Steiff also was inspired by the Teddy Roosevelt political cartoon, but presumably he was. All right, well, that's fun. Let's all take a moment to get the image of a clubbed bear out of our heads and go back to fun cartoons. So it's a new day at the psychiatric booth. Lucy's telling Snoopy, today, let's talk about your background. Were you happy at home? Did you like your mother and father? As she talks, we see Snoopy thinking about this, and he's imagining himself in a comfy beanbag chair in front of the TV with some snacks, and we see him being served his dinner on a nice little tea cart. So yeah, in fact, his life is pretty cushy, actually. Lucy is pushing on. As I understand it, you hear noises at night. This makes it hard for you to stay outside and fulfill your duties as a watchdog, and you feel guilty. Is that correct? Is that correct? Snoopy's dozing. Listen to me when I'm talking to you. You're paying me to help you, and you're going to listen. Snoopy salutes. No need to salute. 5 cents, please. He hands her a bowl of food. I hate when I get paid in dog food. Another interlude for the episode. This one is Yellow, singing Woodstock atop his little tree, wakes up Snoopy, who is annoyed, and stomps over there and brains him with a musical note. Back to the action. Lucy's feeling mean. I feel mean. That's how we know she's feeling mean. I hate the whole world. Nobody better get in my way. Snoopy hears this, and of course, he takes the challenge. He hops in front of her, starts dancing around. She's like, all right, let's do this. She didn't say that exactly, but she says something comparable. Linus realizes there's going to be a fight. Fight! Lucy and Snoopy are having a fight. And Charlie Brown goes running over, although he doesn't actually do anything. This is another one of those part stories. We don't get the whole thing. So Lucy's in fighting stance, right? Got her dukes up. Snoopy's just dancing around, hopping around, sticking out his tongue, trying to lick her. He starts doing that helicopter thing with his ears, flying around and trying to lick her. And finally she's had enough of that. I surrender. I said I surrender. Then they start doing that yeah thing at each other and end up accidentally touching lips, and both of them are repulsed by that. Blue interlude now, up on the doghouse. Woodstock climbs up and over Snoopy's head so that he can make an elegant 5-point dive into the dog dish, only to discover no water, just dog food. Poor Woodstock. Charlie Brown steps out of the back door of the Brown house to look for Snoopy. Snoopy! And he doesn't come, of course, so Charlie Brown stomps out to the doghouse. I asked you to come down from there. Snoopy does, in sort of his, not sarcastic, sort of his, snotty way. Like, oh, you called? Kind of thing. You've been acting awfully independent lately. I'm the one who takes care of you. I'm the one who feeds you. As we see this, we see images of a line of dog food bowls, like a buffet for Snoopy to choose from. Charlie Brown reading to Snoopy in bed. Again, Snoopy has a pretty cushy life. Look at me when I'm talking to you. Without me, you'd be nothing. Everything you have because of me. Even that collar around your neck. Why, I remember when I went out and bought it for you with money that I had saved. So Snoopy takes off the collar and hands it to him. I hate it when he does that. Basically, if you've seen He's Your Dog, Charlie Brown, this is that whole opening bit before he gets shipped off to the to obedience school, to Daisy Hill Puppy Farm for a little refresher course. And ends up at Pepper and Patty's house, and there's a whole thing. Go watch it, it's fun. So now there's a yellow interlude, again. I hate when they do the same color interludes twice, but, you know, what are you going to do? We see Woodstock hovering around Snoopy. He asks a question in his little Woodstock speech. It's upside down, of course, because Woodstock chronically flies upside down. Snoopy, in kind, responds with an upside down question mark. Back to the action. Charlie Brown's watching TV now on that little pillow tuffet thing that they like to sit on in Peanuts. Snoopy enters, climbs up Charlie Brown's back, up onto his big Charlie Brown head, and falls asleep. Charlie Brown gets up, trudges out to the doghouse, trudges out to the back patio, back porch, and then breaks into a run, slams on the brakes, essentially, at the doghouse so that Snoopy is propelled forward. It's a level shot from Charlie Brown's head onto the top of the doghouse, never wakes up. It's really quite impressive for Charlie Brown. Charlie Brown goes back inside. Snoopy somehow has already beaten him back in there and is now asleep on top of the TV, his big, if you believe the kids in class, his big moose-like nose hanging down over the TV. How can I see anything with your stupid head in the way? Snoopy's still dozing, but he lifts his head. Forget it. Charlie Brown trudges off. Snoopy hops down, takes the good seat on the tuffet in front of the TV, turns to the camera, kind of gives a Snoopy grin, and that's it. Or is it? Because this is one of those episodes that we get occasionally where there's a bonus post-credits scene. We have all the credits in French, and then just before everything winds up, we see Snoopy and Charlie Brown out in the yard. And Charlie Brown is saying that Snoopy needs to learn to obey. You need to obey commands. Now sit. And I think he starts to sit, or Charlie Brown doesn't wait for him to sit or something. Charlie Brown turns and goes back into the house immediately. Snoopy has beaten him back in there and is already sitting in a comfy chair because Snoopy's Snoopy. And I may have mentioned this already. He has a pretty cushy life. And that is the end of the episode. Okay. Any one of these segments on their own could have been the whole episode. They could have broken it up, done different segments. The He's Your Dog bit has a bunch of stuff they could have done as the different, 3 or 4 segments of this episode of Peanuts by Schulz. That would have been great. The Scared to be a Watchdog bit would have been great. Lucy feeling mean and Snoopy challenging her on it would have been great. But no, they take bits of each one. I don't understand. I don't know where in the sequence of 104 episodes this one was made. If it was towards the end and they knew they weren't going to make it anymore, but they had all this stuff they wanted to do on screen, maybe? Or maybe it was one of the first ones and they were like, we don't really know what we're doing. We got these little individual bits. Let's throw them in there. It all kind of fits the theme. Come on, Snoopy kind of thing, I guess. If your inflection for the phrase is, come on, Snoopy, and not, come on, Snoopy, like you're cheering for him on the ball field or something. So, the individual parts are fine, but as a whole, it's a little frustrating if you're expecting episodic Peanuts. Even if you were reading each of these segments each day as strips in the paper, you would feel disjointed. If you read every day, if you just read once in a while, then fine, I guess. Although the first storyline about being scared of the dark, you might wonder, well, gee, what happened? Why is he scared? You're not going to find out. But if you were reading the strip every day, it would feel a little disjointed. You'd be like, well, yesterday I had Cheerios and Snoopy was at the psychiatric booth because he was scared of the dark. Now, today, I sat down with my peanut butter toast, and Snoopy's not obeying commands. What the heck, man? Is it because I didn't eat Cheerios again? A guy can't eat Cheerios every day. Come on. So, yeah, it's just more stress than you want when you read or watch Peanuts. I don't know. If you guys want to talk me down, feel free. charliebrownpodcast@gmail.com. I, though, before we get on with the podcast, I'm going to go eat some banana bread.
I can't stand this. I'm going to get a glass of water.
Oh my, look at all this. The next step is up to you? No? Young ladies in review. Oh boy, nah. Restful sleep? Nah. How to keep your husband happy? Say, hi there, I didn't see you there. Sean is the name. What's that? Am I going through my spam emails? Well, that's a good question, but no, I'm not going through my spams. I'm going through my database of weird records so that I can schedule my upcoming podcast episodes. What podcast, you ask? Wow, you are full of excellent questions. My podcast is called My Weird Record Collection. Just like anybody else who listens to records, I have the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, Michael Jackson, Vince Guaraldi, some comedy stuff. But unlike others who listen to vinyl, I also have some of those, well, oddball albums you might find in the miscellaneous divider that you see in the used record stores. Those records that the stores literally don't know where to file because they're, well, weird. Oftentimes these records tell you about a time when YouTube did not exist, so you had to get your how-tos and exercises and whatnot from somewhere. Might as well be a record. Even better, quite often these oddities have unintentional humor.
Now for those tender little white breasts.
Every month on the 15th, a new episode of My Weird Record Collection drops. And I tell you as much of the story behind these weird records as I can. I also wax philosophical about record collecting and offer you my own tips and tricks. Check it out. My Weird Record Collection is on all the major podcast providers and on the social media under the handle of My Weird Records. Catch you on the 15th.
Now there is a man-sized bite.
Ernest Jennings Ford was born in Fordstown, Tennessee. That sounds fake, doesn't it? But I swear it's true. On February 13, 1919, and grew up in Bristol, Tennessee. He got a job as an announcer at WOPI Radio in Bristol. WOPI, by the way, now calls itself ESPN Tri-Cities and is an all-sports station. I suspect when Ford was there, it was not an ESPN station. I'm just guessing. Later, Ford went on to study at the Cincinnati Conservatory of Music. Noted alumni other than Ford who came out of there. Oh, why is he notable? We'll get there in a minute. But the other alumni include cancer researcher Aldred Scott Worthen, trumpeter Al Hurt, jazz pianist Pat Moran McCoy, and composer Harold Morris. Also Conlon Nancrow and Margaret McClure Stitt. The conservatory was founded by Clara Bauer in 1867 as part of a girls' finishing school. In 1955, the conservatory would merge with the College of Music of Cincinnati, forming the Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music, which is now part of the University of Cincinnati. Ernest Ford served in World War II as a bombardier in the Army Air Corps. After the war, he moved to California and got a job at KFXM in San Bernardino, which bills itself as the lost gold mine in the desert and offers up oldies from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Then he went to KXLA in Pasadena. KXLA, those call letters are now used by a TV station, and the radio station has become KWVE. The KXLA call letters, if you want to impress people at parties, you can tell them, were also used by the fictional TV station in the film The China Syndrome and in the Bewitched TV spin-off Tabitha, which is a thing I didn't know existed. KXLA was also a fake radio station in the movie Joe Dirt. I'm pretty sure Ernie Ford was not in any of those. It was during his time in radio that Ford became Tennessee Ernie. Did you get it? Tennessee Ernie Ford, because he was born in Tennessee. It'd be weird if they called him Oregon Ernie Ford. Quick, name a famous singer from Oregon. Name anyone famous from Oregon. Ford also created a character called the Pea Picker and would introduce songs on the radio with a hillbilly voice and sometimes sing along. Country singer and record producer Cliffy Stone heard Ford on the radio and put him on a TV show called Hometown Jamboree, which was simulcast on KXLA radio and on TV. Tennessee Ernie Ford started getting attention. Are you still not sure who this is or why we care? Well, it's this guy.
You load 16 tons, what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store.
Yeah, that guy. Now you get it. Between 1949 and 1976, Ford released 83 records with Capitol Records, and I don't know how many singles. Lots of them. When 16 Tons was released as a single, it was the fastest-selling single in Capitol's history at that time. Ford would go on to sell more than 400 million records worldwide. 40 million of those were gospels, hymns, and spirituals. He also made television appearances, most famously as Cousin Ernie on I Love Lucy in 1955. Now we're really getting to the heart of this. The same year, 1955, Ford Motor Company announced that it was sponsoring a new variety television show for the NBC network and needed a host. Hold on, I gotta check real quick. You guys ever heard of Ford Motor Company? Oh, well, don't worry. I'll fill you in. Henry Ford was born in Spring Wells Township. Note, I said Henry Ford, not Ernie Ford. This all gets very confusing. So Henry Ford was born in Spring Wells Township, Wayne County, Michigan, on July 30th, 1863. He was interested in mechanical things from an early age and built his first steam engine at the age of 15. He would later apprentice as a machinist, then repair Westinghouse steam engines before going to work in 1891 as an engineer at the Edison Illuminating Company of Detroit, where Thomas Edison himself became a mentor and friend to Henry Ford. In 1893, Henry Ford built a small one-cylinder gasoline model on his kitchen table, similar to the one that would later power the first automobile, which he built in June 1896. It was called the Quadricycle and basically just consisted of a frame with 4 bicycle wheels. Soon, Henry Ford was in the auto industry. His first automobile company went bankrupt. He founded another called the Henry Ford Company, but would later leave that when it became the Cadillac Motor Car Company, and Ford went on to found the Ford Motor Company in 1903. A bunch of car stuff that we don't really care about happened for a while. And then, on October 4th, 1956, there was the national release on the NBC network of the Tennessee Ernie Ford Show, sponsored by Ford Motor Company.
Hey, pea pickers, come in this house. Ernie's here. Hey, everybody come along with me. Time to listen to the man from Tennessee. Pull up a chair, sit down, relax for a while. We know he'll sing a tune that just fits your style. He loves everybody. Now's the time to go. Come along, good people, to the Tennessee Ernie Show.
The Ford Show was an instant top 10 hit and soon became the #1 half-hour variety show in the country. It stayed at #1 from April 1957 to June of 1961. Every show had music, comedy, and guest stars. But the most popular part, even if the advertisers and network initially hated it, was how Ford closed every show singing a hymn, gospel, or spiritual number. Among the show's producers was a young Norman Lear, by the way, who would go on to create some of the most memorable shows in television history, like All in the Family and Good Times. In total, the Ford Show ran for 5 years and 191 episodes. Over 100 guest stars, jokes, his band, the Top 20, and lots of music is all great, but clearly what got people to keep tuning in every Thursday night, in my opinion, and garnered all those Emmy nominations, was a little addition that the producers made to the show in 1959. I hope you're still listening, because we're finally getting to the meat of this. In November 1959, Ford, the motor company, not the singer, signed a licensing deal with Peanuts. The deal gave Ford exclusive right to have Peanuts kids promote their new compact car, the Falcon. The Falcon was Ford's compact answer to the huge gas hogs that families had been buying. It came as a 4-door or 2-door sedan or station wagon, or as a Falcon Ranchero pickup. In my own head, and I'm not a car guy, but in my own head, when I think of the 1950s, I don't think of pickup trucks. Surely they existed, but when I picture cars or I see a movie set or even a movie made in the 1950s, I never see pickup trucks. Where were these things? I didn't go deep enough in my research to see how many of the Ranchero pickups Ford actually sold, but the Falcon itself was a really big deal. Ford Motor Company thought that it would sell 650 of these Falcons in the year after it was introduced, which was started in September 1959. Ford didn't quite sell that many, but it did sell 456,703 that first year and was Ford's bestseller. You could get one for only $1,975, which sounds amazing, except when you consider this was 1959, and in today's dollars, that's $21,000, which actually isn't all that bad for a brand new car, depending on what it is. So it's a good deal. Okay, here's some brief car facts that I barely understand, but some of you might. The Falcon had a 144 cubic inch straight 6-cylinder engine and got 25 to 30 miles per gallon. The mileage thing I understand. The cubic inch, whatever. But you car people might be excited about that. Ford called the car the small car with the big feel and put it up against European cars like the Volkswagen Beetle because foreign car sales were way up in the 1950s, which is interesting to me because that wasn't all that long after World War II, but they were up. Foreign car sales were something like 10% of the total U.S. auto sales at that point. Around the same time, Chevrolet unveiled the Corvair, and Chrysler introduced its Valiant, which were both competing with the Falcon, and just as importantly, competing with those encroaching foreign car sales. So Chevy and Chrysler were in it too, but neither of them had what Ford had. Yep. Of course, there was no Linus and Lucy music yet because it hadn't been written. Giraldi was still just Giraldi, not Giraldi the Peanuts guy. What we meant was Ford had Peanuts. Nobody else could claim the right to use the now extremely popular Charlie Brown and Friends to sell things, but Ford could. Under its licensing deal, Peanuts would only do car ads for Ford. That included magazines, billboards, and animated commercials. Ford paid a one-year licensing fee of $75,000 in 1959, which would equal about $813,000 today. In 1960, the fee went up to $82,500 and $86,000 in 1961, $100,000 in 1962 and 63. I don't know why it stayed the same in 62 and 63. Maybe they made a new deal for 2 years instead of a new deal each of those 2 years. I don't know. $100,000 would be equivalent to over $1 million today. Schulz's take of all those licensing fees for that 5-year period was $216,750, which equals $2.3 million today. J. Walter Thompson was the Madison Avenue Mad Men TV show type advertising firm. Boy, Mad Men was a good show. I do own a couple seasons of Mad Men, not the whole series. I think you can stream that like on the AMC app or something. I should go back and watch that. Yeah, I'll do that at the same time I go back and watch all these other TV shows that I keep saying I'm going to go back and watch. If you haven't watched Mad Men, do yourself a favor and go do that. Anyway, so J. Walter Thompson was the firm that worked this deal. It's a firm that was around for over 150 years total, going all the way back to 1896. It had huge clients, not just Ford, but also big names like Kraft and the United States Marines themselves. But, 150 years is a long time. And as the media landscape changed and became more digital, for whatever reason, the firm had trouble keeping up with the changes in the advertising landscape. It also merged a couple of times with other companies, and finally by 2018, the J. Walter Thompson name just didn't exist anymore. It'd been absorbed by other companies. So in 1959, they started doing these animated ads, which is a big deal because Peanuts hadn't been animated before. Schulz took an active part, not surprisingly, in producing the print ads, certainly, and consulting on the storyboards and the scripts for these TV ads. He also made the final call on who the agencies would choose to do the voices, although, as he would later, he insisted on having real kids do the voices, not adult actors pretending to be kids. Even back then, Schulz knew that this was a must. The animated commercials were directed by a former Disney animator who was now working with the production company Playhouse Pictures. You might know this guy. His name was Bill Melendez. Melendez later would form his own production company and become the only animator that Schulz would trust with his characters. And we're all the better for it. How great would it have been to be and I know it's cliche, but to be the fly on the wall in 1959 when Schulz and Melendez are meeting and sitting down for the first time to hash out how these characters are going to move on screen, what are they going to sound like. That would have been fascinating. I wish Melendez, and as I'm saying this, maybe he did, but I haven't come across it. I wish Melendez had written, ideally, a book about his time working on Peanut stuff, or even just a really good article about it, kind of get his perspective on how this happened. I know there are quotes here and there talking about it, but I mean just a really deep dive into that. I wish that existed. I mean, yes, A Charlie Brown Christmas was the first TV special, but these Ford ads were literally the first time that we would hear what Charlie Brown and the others sound like. And it was a big deal to decide what that was, because it set the stage for what they would sound like in A Charlie Brown Christmas. What if they got it wrong? What if Schulz didn't like what they did in the ads and was so turned off that he turned down the idea later to do a TV special? But that's not what happened. According to his friends, Schulz was quite proud of how the Ford ads turned out.
And now the characters from the comic strip, Peanuts.
This is a palm tree. It's called that because you can fit the palm of your hand around it. Really? And this is a Falcon. It's America's lowest price 6-passenger car. Now, some people think Falcon is called lowest price just because it costs less. But the real reason it's called lowest price is that Ford puts the price stickers on 282 feet below sea level in Death Valley. That's ridiculous. The only reason Falcon is called lowest price is simply because it is America's lowest price 6-passenger car. You're right, Charlie Brown. There are times when being right is just not enough.
Test drive a Falcon at your Ford dealers right now.
Of course, they got it wrong, because if you listen to the ad, the 1950s Peanuts ads find the characters looking, I don't know, maybe kindergarten-ish, but the voices are pretty preschool, I think, compared to what we're used to seeing. Clearly, they were always kid voices, but these early ads, I think, sound even younger than they would in the TV specials. And I don't know if it totally works. I think the ads themselves are funny, but I don't know if the voices quite work. Kind of like the Peanuts by Schulz. We listened to one of those earlier this episode. The voices on there don't quite work compared to what we're used to either. But Schulz, these Ford ads, Schulz really liked them. He was maybe less proud of the Dolly Madison cupcake ads that would come later.
The Zinger Zapper is someone in this room. To find the culprit, I'll put zingers on this plate. Devil's food with luscious chocolate icing, gold cake with dreamy vanilla, raspberry with coconut, and all with cream sinners. I'm gonna turn the light out and catch him red-handed. Okay, now we know who the Zinger Zapper is. The butler? You blockhead.
When you have zingers around, there's no escaping the Zinger Zapper.
But that's a discussion for another time. But the Ford campaign with Peanuts was huge. Really popular. Ford really liked it. Schulz enjoyed doing them. But, with everything good, there's the downside. Schulz started getting heat and would continue to get heat for the next several decades for allegedly being greedy and selling out, commercializing his characters. Famously, Bill Watterson of Calvin and Hobbes, as much as he revered Schulz's work, hated the fact that there was all this merchandising and all this advertising using these characters. He refused to do all of that with his characters, which is cool. That's his choice, but he didn't understand it. And early on, Schulz got heat from his other fellow cartoonists for this, and he never understood it. He always thought that the job of a comic strip was not to, create art. It was to sell newspapers. And an extension of that is using, the work, the art, if you want to call it that, and Schulz didn't really, rightly or wrongly. Point of it is to sell stuff. And he worked really hard to make his strip the best it could be, partly because, a lot of it was because he just really wanted to draw, but because he wanted to make his client happy. But, uncomfortable or not with the criticism, unwilling or not to call it art, he still got rich off of this, and other cartoonists kind of sort of resented him for that. Anyway, getting back to this guy, Tennessee Ernie Ford, which is how this segment started. Tennessee Ernie Ford was one of the most popular humans ever in the history of television at the time, and maybe still, if you're looking historically. I grant you that the history of television at that time was not all that long, but still.
Some people say a man is made out of mud.
I'm sure it was a coincidence that Ford Motor Company shared its name with the most popular singer on TV. Most popular except maybe Lucy Ricardo. If only Ricky would let her perform. Well. Anyway, it's not surprising that Ford would mash up the most popular variety show with the most popular comic strip and sell some cars. It seems like a proverbial no-brainer.
Everybody ready? Ready. What about Snoopy? Isn't there something he can do? Yeah, he's pretty good at imitations. What, Snoopy? What does he know about doing imitations? He's just a dog. Ready? Ladies and gentlemen, the Ford Show. Starring Tennessee Ernie Ford. Well, you have to admit, it's a pretty good imitation.
To be clear, and for the record, the Ford Falcon campaign was not the first ad campaign using Peanuts to sell something that wasn't Peanuts, right? There were already ads using the Peanuts characters, advertising the fact that there is a Peanuts comic strip. Using the Peanuts characters in Ford ads in print or on TV was not the first time, though, that they were used in an ad for something that wasn't Peanuts. That distinction apparently went to, and I have to thank Nat Gertler for pointing this out to me from the Og blog. He realized recently that the first ad campaign was probably Connecticut Blue Cross in 1958, a year before Ford. It wasn't original art like the Ford ads, but it would reuse art from the strip to promote insurance just in Connecticut. Before that, there were Peanuts illustrations in Eastman Kodak's 1955 Brownie booklet, but that was really more of technically a how-to manual for how to use your camera. It was more that kind of thing than an ad. And none of those things, the Kodak or Connecticut Insurance, none of that used animated ads. It was all print stuff. The Tennessee Ernie Ford Show ended in 1961. The Peanuts licensing deal with Ford ended around 1964 or 65. Eventually, Peanuts would go on to advertise other stuff like MetLife Insurance, right? The famous Snoopy ads for MetLife. We know Bill Watterson from Calvin and Hobbes probably never would have signed on with Ford or Tennessee Ernie, but on the other hand, who could say no to this guy?
I owe my soul to the company store.
And that's our show. In a minute, I'll tell you what's up next episode. Thanks to Kevin McLeod at Incompetech.com for Creative Commons use of his songs. Thanks to Kevin McLeod at Incompetech.com for Creative Commons use of his songs, Bass Walker, Mining by Moonlight, and Hidden Agenda. Thanks to Henry Pope for the use of his Linus and Lucy remix, which you hear once I stop talking. Thanks to Nick Jones for the use of his song, 25% Off. Thanks to Sean Courtney for the This Month in Peanuts history theme. You, yes you, can find It's a Podcast, Charlie Brown, on all sorts of podcatchers, which you probably know by now, right? But in case you don't realize where this show came from, how it got into your ears, just know you can find it anywhere. Or you can tell your friends, hey, go find this thing anywhere. While you're at it, leave a review. A 5-star review at Apple Podcasts is awesome. It helps people find the show. Other pod providers also give you the option to leave a review. Please do. Whether that's a number of stars, whether that's a whole multi-word review, whatever it is, please do that. Whether it's for this show or any other show that you listen to, because it does help people find the show. It also makes me feel just all warm and fuzzy inside. Almost as good as a donut does. Maybe not quite. Donuts are pretty awesome, but almost that good. If you hate this show, well, just look at leaving a nice review as a cruel joke that you can play on others. You can like the It's a Podcast Charlie Brown Facebook page. You can follow us in a bunch of places as It's a Podcast Charlie Brown. I'm also Carnival of Glee in a bunch of places, like Blue Sky, for example. It's Podcast Charlie Brown's also on Instagram. Carnival of Glee is up there at Mastodon, Hive. I am It's a Podcast on Threads. I'm everywhere. There's a YouTube channel, Carnival of Glee YouTube channel, all sorts of stuff. Basically, look for the show either at It's a Podcast Charlie Brown or Carnival of Glee, and you're going to find me. I am still on X. I say this every episode. I'm probably going to pull the plug at some point. I keep saying that, but increasingly I feel like, yeah, I need to do that. But I haven't yet. So I am still there. Just know that I don't check it out very much. So look for me in one of those other places. If you have something more specific to say, email me at charliebrownpodcast@gmail.com. Check out the website, carnivalofgleecreations.com. There's stuff about this show. There's stuff about Atari Bytes, BYTES, which is my other podcast that is on an ever-increasing in length hiatus, but there are hundreds of episodes literally out there to listen to of that show and to enjoy. We did a random strip. We did not do a random strip. We will do a random strip of the month next episode. One of my favorite segments where if I'm doing it, I pick a strip literally at random from the 50 years and read it and tell you what I think of it. I really enjoy doing that, but I really like it even more when you guys send me your random strips of the month. It's really easy. You go to Go Comics or one of your books that you have on your shelf, you open it up, you flip to a page, and you read to us on a recording. Your phone certainly has a recording app on it. You read that strip to us. If you don't want to do it randomly, if you have a particular strip in mind, that's awesome too. It can be a strip you really like. It can be one you don't like. We've done that too, and that's always interesting, to find a strip that you're just not a fan of or you actively hate. And tell us what happens. Tell us when it was published if you know, because it's nice to have a context when in Schulz's career this was coming from. Read it to us. Tell us what you think. And I play it on the show. Very awesome. It's a lot of fun. Support the show by telling other people about it. Check out the other podcast, Atari Bytes, like I said, and come back next time for the next episode when we will have, as I said, a random strip of the month. We will also do news and feedback for March. If you guys have comments or questions or ideas or things you want to talk about this show, about Peanuts, you know what, really just about most anything, I will probably share it on the show, and time we do that is in our news and feedback segment. I also pull out interesting news items or just things that maybe don't have a news peg to them but are just interesting in and around the Peanuts comic universe, and I share them. And that's what we're going to do next month. So, random strip, news and feedback. I will also give you my thoughts about Camp Snoopy, Season 1, Episode 11. We are very close to the end of the season. I believe that after that there will be 2 more episodes. And then, gosh, I don't know, guess we'll have to fold the podcast, because we'll be out of animated Peanuts. Because, man, there's nothing else to talk about, for goodness sakes. I'm just kidding. But we do have, including next time, we do have 3 more episodes of Camp Snoopy to talk about. And one of those will be in the next episode of this podcast, episode 11. That's about it for this time, other than for me to say, just remember, of all the Charlie Browns in the world, you are the Charlie Browniest. And now, you should go eat a donut.
Just needs a little love.